afternoon, ma'am.
And sir, before you take your seat, you raise your right hand, record this very brief. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you.
Pour myself some water real quick. I'm parched.
Say whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Dr. Blake.
Good afternoon.
Can you please tell us what your current profession is?
Sure. I'm a police practices and human factor consultant. Have done some training in the past. I have my own company called Blake Consulting and Training. Actually, should probably cut that training portion off. I don't do that as much anymore, but I do most of my time is focused on consulting in cases like this.
And now, when you say police practices, what do you mean?
Police practices ranges everything that police officers do, from search and seizure to the use of force and everything in between, traffic stops, everything that police officers do. So that's what I look at. That's what I technically investigate in these type of cases, and they ultimately are what I opine upon as an end result in certain cases. In others, I focus on the human factors aspect specific to policing and critical incidents.
What are human factors?
Human factors, interesting area of looking at performance. So human factors essentially, succinctly, is kind of looking at human capabilities and limitations within a system. So we've got the capabilities and limitations of an individual person, human being. When I talk about system, I'm talking about the organizational system that those people perform within in any given situation. So it could be a nurse in a surgery center. It could be a pharmacist. It could be a mining operation. It could be a policing situation, which is where my focus is. But human factors is focused in a wide range of areas. It has all types of different specialty areas, scientists, researchers, people with varying degrees in different areas such as psychology primarily, and also engineering. I'm clearly not on the engineering side, I'm on the psychology side. So I'm focused on that area.
All right, let's start with your background in police practices. Were you ever a law enforcement officer?
I was a law enforcement officer for about 14 years.
Tell us about your law enforcement experience.
So after I got out of the military, I joined the Department of Energy as a security police officer at Lawrence Livermore Labs in California. That job it's a law enforcement job. We were granted limited powers of arrest and we carried firearms. A little bit different job though. Our primary focus was the safety and security of the installation and the people. And as I was there, I joined what's called a special response team. And their responsibility is kind of a quasi counterterrorism because those labs have certain materials that need to be protected. So our primary task in that area was the recapture and recovery of special nuclear material is what it's called. And, I stopped there. After that, I did a couple years there, and then I went on to the San Francisco Bay Area Rapid Transit Police Department, obviously in San Francisco, California, and the surrounding areas. Obviously went to a police academy, a state police academy for that. Worked there for several years on patrol in several different jurisdictions. It covered a lot of geographical areas. And then from there, I went on to the Livermore Police Department, where I spent the majority of my sworn law enforcement career. Did a lot of tasks and duties there that are typical of law enforcement. I worked patrol, SWAT, did gangs, narcotics, was a field training officer, a lot of the things that you've heard from a lot of witnesses so far. After my time there, I went on to actually got injured on the job and ended up not being able to return. I wanted to stay in law enforcement, so I ended up going to what's called the Alameda County Sheriff's Department, which is near where Livermore was. Ended up working there in their regional training center as a civilian trainer. And I focused there on use of force in the force option simulator program that they had there. And I think you've heard some information about that from Mr. Bartell yesterday. But that's that simulator with the video and the ability to use replica weapons that have lasers on them and interact with the screen. Very interesting job for me, because during that time I was moving through the education process. I've always been interested in this area of human factors, but especially applied to policing. But as I was able to do that job, I was able to watch performance in simulated situations. And I would see what happens to people when they operate under stress. I would see when we would debrief them after a scenario, maybe what they didn't remember, what they didn't perceive, or they misperceived. So I was able to kind of apply that scholar practitioner kind of hat in being able to not only have an academic basis, but I was also just observing for that information as I was going through these scenarios. And then after that, that's when I left law enforcement as being employed in any fashion.
Do you hold any law enforcement instructor certifications? You can just listen.
Yeah, sure. The law enforcement instructor certifications included, I'm a firearms instructor. These are California Post certified. So it's the equivalent of MCOLs. You've heard that terminology. We have that same thing in California. So they certified people to be firearms instructor, which I was. Force option simulator, which I did. I was an instructor in reality-based training. That was through a separate company. I was a field training officer, so that's an instructor certification. There's more, but I keep forgetting them.
It's okay, we can move on.
Yes.
Have you attended any use of force or officer-involved shooting trainings?
Yes, and I'm hoping to get this out. It's the Robert S. Presley Institute of Criminal Investigations Officer-Involved Shooting Investigator course. That's provided through Cal Post. That's the only officer-involved shooting class, but I've had other training in the area.
Do you maintain memberships in criminal justice-related organizations?
I do, several. Academy of Criminal Justice Science, which is more on the academic side. So that's an organization that looks at what's going on in policing. They conduct a lot of research and publish journals associated with that. So I keep current through that. I'm also a member of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Also, the Association of Force Investigators, which is a kind of a national organization focused on looking at use of force. And then lastly, the California Force Instructors Association, which is state-specific, but we have some international international folks that are members. And again, we're focused on training trends and training information in police use of force.
Have you ever taught criminal justice at any higher institutions?
I have. I was a criminal justice professor at 2 community colleges. Basically taught intro to criminal justice courses, and also in those positions I actually also functioned, because those community colleges there, like here, oversee police academies. So by being hired as an adjunct criminal justice professor, I had a dual ability to teach in the police academy there, which I did.
Okay, and have you taught police officers about safety and tactics, police procedures, or use of force and officer-involved shootings? Have you done all those and shared your education with members in the field?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now I called you doctor. You're not a medical doctor.
No, don't like
Okay,
that confusion.
but you have a doctorate and you have a master's. Please tell the jury what your master's is in and your doctorate.
So my master's degree is in psychology. I did a thesis focused on police use of force. So the actual research project was looking at decision-making and reaction time in fatigued and non-fatigued states, basically. So that research project had to be completed in order to get the master's degree. And then my doctoral degree is in performance psychology. Again, focused a lot of my research during that time, focused on police critical incidents, police use of force. My doctoral dissertation was an application of what's called the human factors analysis and classification system to law enforcement shootings. That was, again, a little bit over a year-long research project. Did a lot of interviews and a lot of digging into archival data to complete that project in order to get the doctorate.
Okay. Now, you've heard some of the testimony in this case.
I believe I've heard almost all of it.
Okay, and we heard from Dr. Kroll yesterday.
Yes, sir.
Okay. He talked about peer-reviewed articles. I'm not going to go through what that means, but do you have any peer-reviewed articles that are related to your field of study?
I do. I have 9, I think the total is right now. I published the one master's degree thesis project in a peer-reviewed journal, done some research on firearms reaction time, some case studies on police shootings, and looked at force option simulators. As a lot of research has been done, so we did basically a systematic review to look at how those things, what research has been conducted and where we need to go in the future and what's been found up to this point.
Okay, and do you maintain any memberships related to human factors?
I do. I'm a member of the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society, which is an international organization that's focused on that area of science. They also publish 2 journals that I also receive through them. And then I'm also a member of the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society Forensic Professionals Technical Group. Now that's the portion, the arm or branch of Human Factors and Ergonomics Society that focuses on kind of what we're doing here, looking at and investigating incidents and accidents in different fields, applying human factors, and ultimately maybe ending up in a courtroom like this.
Have you taught human factors to law enforcement officers or executives, attorneys, others in the field?
Yes, I have. After I left, well, actually kind of overlapping with my tenure at the Alameda County Sheriff's Department, I also was a kind of subcontracted to a company called Human Performance Training Institute. And there we did teach a course across the nation that looked at all these human performance factors. We went through some of the science. We talked about and taught the application of the science to these type of incidents, use of force incidents, to include officer-involved shootings.
Okay, and then you said you were a consultant, you have a consulting company. Can you name some of the organizations that you've consulted for in relation to police practices and human factors?
Yes, I've consulted with the California Department of Justice, the United States Department of Justice. I've consulted with the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. I've consulted with several prosecutors' offices in the state of California, as well as defense attorneys in both. And then there's a difference between civil and criminal litigation. So also plaintiff and defense attorneys in the civil litigation world.
Your Honor, at this time, the defense tenders Dr. Blake as an expert in the field of human factor psychology and police practices.
Thank you, Bonnie, Your Honor.
Okay. Was it psychology in police practices or and?
Now, it's human factor psychology, and then also a separate police practice.
So an expert in those 2 fields is what you're requesting?
Yes, Your
Thank you, Your Honor. Just want to make sure, because kind of now 2 things. The report I got was a human factor psychology draft report. That's a report you prepared.
Yes, sir.
It was a human.
I mean, I'd need to see what you have there, but
I'm gonna take a
it
look
sounds
at
like,
it.
sure. That looks like it, yes.
And it's titled Human Factor Psychology. It
Yes.
wasn't anything with use of force at that point in time, but now we're going into that as well.
I don't think that he tried to certify me as an expert in use of force.
Oh, that's what he just did.
No.
Police practices, okay. Going into human factor psychology, there are 21 identified and recognized specialties in the American Psychological Association. Human factors is not one of them, is it?
No, it's not. I think there's a section, so you're talking about all the sections. And I was previously a member of the APA. They do have a performance psychology section, which is very closely related.
There's a police and public safety one, right?
Yes.
And you're not a member of that.
No.
There's a behavioral and cognitive psychology. That's another one, but you're not a member of that.
No, sir.
There's like 50 divisions in the APA you can join, and human factors psychology is not one of them.
No, it's not. As I stated, human factor psychology is a umbrella area of science that's made up of people from various different backgrounds in psychology and other fields.
So you're not licensed to practice psychology anywhere in any state, are you?
Well, wait a minute. A licensed psychologist is completely different
That's what I just want to make it clear for the
Yeah,
jury.
okay.
Just want to make
So
clear.
a licensed psychologist is somebody who practices clinical psychology and diagnoses people with maybe a mental disorder. I do not, that's a completely separate field.
And that's why I want to make sure, because you sort of psychology, we want to make it clear, you can't counsel anyone, you're not licensed to counsel anyone, that's not
No,
anything
sir.
that you do.
No, sir.
Now, Michigan Tech has an undergrad program in human factor psychology.
Okay.
I looked it up and it said human factor psychology focuses primarily on the interaction between people and machines. They make technology work better with humans. That was their definition. It sounds like you're much broader than that, is what you're saying.
Well, there's several definitions. I think if you look at the Human Factors and Ergonomic Society website, you'll find a definition that's closer to what I described.
Well, once again, going to the American Psychiatric Association, they talk about a career in human factor psychology. They talk about jobs where using a hands-free telephone to make a call while driving makes it less dangerous. That's one of the things you can do with human factors.
Yeah, and it's exactly pertinent to what I wrote in my report about attention, divided attention, perception. That's fundamental aspects of that field.
Other top jobs include architecture and design firms, how to build designs that will operate and how people interact with building layouts.
Yeah, again, all of that is safety focused. So warnings, designs, labels. There's been comments on for instance, comments on the Taser, that it's designed like a handgun, so therefore it's prone to error. People or police officers mistaking tasers for handguns or vice versa. So the field is very broad. You are correct.
Now, in terms of that, you are not certified, the Board of Certification in Professional Ergonomics, are you?
No, and I can tell you why if you'd care to know.
Well, would one of the reasons be why that your undergrad degree isn't sufficient to get certified?
It actually, that's correct. Not my undergrad, but my graduate degrees. And the reason why is the field of human factors, like lots of fields, has changed their focus into contemporary topics. One of the contemporary topics is what's called UX, user experience. It's very involved with computers and that type of thing. Human capabilities and limitations associated with functioning with computer programs and all of those. Some of the required courses to become board certified are associated with those things, and to be quite honest with you, I'm not interested in those courses, and I'm not going to go work in that field, so I didn't pursue that any longer.
Well, I mean, it says the mission is to protect the public profession and its professionals by assuming standards of competency and advocating for the value of certification. You don't think you need to be certified because you just don't like it?
Not everybody's a board certified in anything. There's medical doctors that you can get board certification that may not be. There's psychologists that you could get board certification, they may not be.
Going to your undergrad degree, you're an undergrad degree out of Union Institute out of Cincinnati, correct?
Correct.
That was closed in 2019, correct?
I didn't even know that.
Didn't even know that.
Actually, no, I didn't know.
Okay. Were you aware that Union Institute was known as CopU because so many police officers took the classes because they were online?
Actually, I attended in person to a portion of those classes.
a portion, but you still did others that were online.
Sure, that's kind of the norm today.
Were you aware that the Ohio Board of Regents report on Union Institute back in 2002 talked about Union Institute's weakness for lack of academic structures sufficient to produce a minimum level of academic achievement among its graduates?
No, I was not.
And even at Union Institute, you did not get it was nothing to do with human factors, you were criminal justice management,
Absolutely.
which was designed to advance careers of law enforcement personnel into supervisory management and executive positions.
Correct.
You talk about your master's degree. Your master's degree was Kaplan University, correct?
Correct.
Correct. Kaplan University was a for-profit online university.
I believe so, yes. The for-profit part.
So now that's not around. It's been subsumed by Purdue Global, correct?
That's my understanding.
Were you aware that in 2012, the Senate, United States Senate, on Committee on Health, Education, and Labor, produced a report saying students raised concern with academic quality by filing complaints with school, state, and federal agencies regarding the level of education they got at Kaplan?
No, I found it to be vigorous. I did quite a significant and detailed thesis, and I had doctors from other colleges who were on the board who certified my thesis. So I felt it was a rigorous program.
You thought it was a rigorous program, but
Sure.
part of the thing with Kaplan was, going to their ad, a convenient web-based academic program allow you to tailor your own curriculum and plan class and study time to fit your own unique schedule. You kind of did your own thing at Kaplan.
Well, that's not true. I didn't. I don't know what that refers to, but I had a very structured schedule, just like any other college. I'd sign in, watch the instructor, I had to complete the assignments online. I had multiple papers and research projects that had to be completed, and I had to complete the thesis under the observation of a doctor in the field. So again, I thought it was rigorous.
Were you aware that Kaplan was sued by the state of Florida back in 2014 for engaging in unfair and deceptive practices related to student recruitment about job placement and accreditation, and they settled out of court for $1.3 million?
Objection, relevance?
Yeah.
Goes to the academic credentials of his university. He talks about he's a part of academia. This is the type of university he went to for his degree.
I don't see there, a lawsuit where they got sued related to, I don't know what, it don't feel relevant to his qualification.
I'm not either. So I'll sustain that.
Okay. Are you aware of the Harvard Law School report on veteran complaints about misconduct at Kaplan?
Nope.
Okay. Complaints by veterans that it was too easy. A student in psychology was taught to use Microsoft Paint. Was that you?
No.
I would hope not.
I am a military veteran, but I don't recall that at all.
You didn't participate in that study then?
No,
Because
no,
you
sir.
found it hard, but they have a study from Harvard saying it was basically too easy at Kaplan.
Okay. They have a study?
It was a report on veteran complaints about misconduct and illegal practices at Kaplan schools. You're not aware of that?
No.
You also talk about Human Performance Training Institute. You taught there, but that's not a degree.
That's correct.
All right, just want to make sure on that. But that was that was training for law enforcement and aviation personnel? That's,
The boss, the owner of the company, was a former West Point professor who taught and did a lot of the human factors applications in the aviation field in the military. So he started that company, and I came in under him.
I got it from the company that was started by 3 former law enforcement personnel.
Well, so it's changed hands since then.
All right, so it was started by that, but when you came in, it wasn't law enforcement.
No, they had an aviation component, because human factors came from aviation primarily. So this, I just call him the boss. The boss came from that world and opened up this company, and he kept that portion, and he also taught human factors to law enforcement. I came in under him.
Okay. Now, your doctorate is from Grand Canyon University?
Correct.
Now, what I had, is it a doctorate? A doctorate in performance psychology. Is it qualitative or quantitative? Because I saw 2 different ones when I looked up Grand Canyon University.
Well, qualitative and quantitative are research methods. I do believe, I think I looked at the website, and this recent.
Yeah, they separated out 2 of them. And
Yes.
you don't have separated out 2.
No, because at the time, they didn't have that.
Okay. So when
You had a
got it-
choice, you had a choice while you were going, it's really focused on the doctoral dissertation as to whether you want to go down the quantitative route and use those research methods, or you want to use the qualitative route.
Okay, so qualitative route, so that you did more the qualitative route.
Well, I didn't take that program didn't exist. My dissertation is in fact using a qualitative methodology.
But, okay, looking at their website in terms of qualitative, they talked about practices intended to improve employee performance. Use some of the strategies, look at goal setting, enhancing work output, how to improve work and leadership. That's what they describe qualitative doctorate program.
And I don't remember the description of that's not the program I went to, is all I'm saying.
Thank you. I have nothing further. Your Honor.
Thanks, sir.
We so move again, Your Honor?
Leave it at the court's discretion, Your Honor.
Since there's no objection, I'll consider the expert in the field with human factor psychology and police practices.
Okay, Dr. Blake. Anticipation of preparing a report, you reviewed some materials related to this case,
Yes, sir.
and that includes a lot of the videos the jury's seen,
Yes,
and some GRPD policies and training materials.
correct.
You reviewed Mr. Becker's experts' reports,
Yes,
and you have heard, I think you said a lot of the testimony.
yes,
All right. And obviously, prior to listening to the testimony, you prepared a report,
I did.
okay? And you're aware that that report has been submitted to Mr. Becker?
Yes, but according to what he just showed me, yes.
Yes, and it was pretty obvious.
Yes,
And based on that, you've been able to form some opinions that are relevant to this case,
I have.
and also have observed and have a response to some of the opinions of Mr. Becker's experts as well.
Yes,
Okay. Now, you're aware that the prosecution has experts that provided an opinion, and it's Professor Seth Stoughton and
Correct.
Mr. Bloomfield, and their opinion was that in stressful environments, human decision-making suffers. Officers may experience distorted sensory perceptions, including visual distortions, for example, tunnel vision, auditory distortions, for example, auditory blunting, and temporal distortions, perceiving events as occurring more quickly or more slowly than they actually are. You're familiar with that statement by Professor Stoughton and Mr. Bloomfield?
I am.
Do you agree with that statement?
Absolutely. That's what the research shows. I think that's and is actually from Mr. Stoughton's book.
Okay. And so you've listened to some of the testimony. You heard that Professor Stoughton and Mr. Bloomfield indicated that they talked about that they had considered, for example, auditory distortions,
Yes,
okay, when they did the report. You also heard at least Mr. Bloomfield say that he's not an expert in that field,
correct.
okay. Did you also hear that they formed an opinion that no reasonable officer could have heard, for example, the second cartridge go off in this case,
Yes.
or would not have heard the second cartridge go off? Okay. So I'd like to talk about that, in particular, this idea of auditory distortions. And we talked a little bit about auditory blunting and auditory exclusion. Can you tell the jury what auditory distortions are?
Well, so it's auditory exclusions is what was talked about. And basically what we're talking about in general is a failure, a temporary loss of hearing, a failure to hear under acute stress. That's the general consensus from the law enforcement literature. And when I say law enforcement literature, I'm talking about the trade itself. That's how it's talked about. We can move over to the academic world and look at the research, and now we start seeing more information that is consistent with what the law enforcement field believes. And so we have research that is primarily, there's some research in an area called inattention deafness, which is focused on cognitive load, again, failure to hear under cognitive load, usually a visible task, and the failure to hear is an alarm, an audible alarm. But that research is very, very similar. The concept is very, very similar because cognitive load is a stressor. You're under stress. You're having to work hard. So they're the same
I'm going
thing.
to stop you a little bit.
I got going on.
Because there's a lot of terms in there. We need to unpack some of this.
Sorry, I
Okay,
got
so
going.
auditory exclusion, you define, but you started talking about cognitive load. Are there certain conditions that you associate with auditory exclusion?
Sure, stress, cognitive load, and attention are the big ones.
Okay, so let's go with stress first, since that's the one you said first. Most people seem to know what stress is. Is that what you're talking about in connection with conditions that are associated with auditory exclusion?
Yes, stress, it's the capability and demand, that's the capability of the human, the demand of whatever the system is, whatever the task is, and your perception of the ability to deal with that demand. So it's those three things that are going to kind of fundamentally be the foundation for stress.
Okay. Cognitive load, you started talking about it, but what do you mean by cognitive load?
Cognitive load's an area of psychology where, to make it simple, we're looking at, once again, how difficult the task is. Again, it's the stressor. How difficult is the task? How complex is it? Is it time compressed? Is there a lot of things to pay attention to? A lot of things to respond to? Your brain is under a lot of load, and it has a limited ability. You think about it like the RAM in a computer. Your computer only has so much storage space, so much ability to function at a certain speed. And once you surpass that, it kind of goes defunct. So think of the brain like that. There's only so much information we can take in and process and respond to in a certain period of time.
Okay, so the information is coming in, the brain is like a computer, you can only handle so much.
True.
Okay. Now, you also mentioned focus of attention. What did you mean by that?
So in psychology, we have something called the spotlight of attention. So that's one way of looking at it. If you think about looking around a room, as I scan the room, if I look at one person in the jury box, I can pick up a lot of visual detail about that individual. I can tell you what they're wearing, maybe what the writing is on their shirt or the tag on their shirt. But details over here are absolutely, I know people are here, but I can't tell you anything visually about them. I can't garner any information. As a matter of fact, even slightly to the left of the person I may be looking at and focused on, I know they're there. I might know what color sweater they have, but the detail is much, much less. So, it's very easy to do that just looking around the courtroom and focusing on one person, but trying to discern a little bit of information just to the right or the left and then incrementally go out, and you realize very quickly that as you move out to the periphery while you're fixated, you're getting less and less information.
So these are the three sort of conditions that you would associate with auditory exclusion.
Yes, in the sense that what I was describing there was visual attention. So auditory attention, again, if you're listening for something, you're much more likely to pick it up. If it's an unexpected noise, especially in a complex environment or in a noisy environment even still, where you're focused on another area with all of your attentional resources, be it visual or otherwise, certainly you may not pick up that information.
Okay. And so you saw Mr. Bloomfield's testimony, and he provided an opinion where he said he considered auditory exclusion, and he also provided an opinion that said that the event at issue here was not the type of stressful situation where one could suffer auditory exclusion or blunting. Do you agree with that?
No.
Why not?
If if you look at the police trade literature, and then you even go into the research that's been conducted here, there's multiple studies in this area. You find that this is exactly the situation, the type of event being an officer-involved shooting, that officers report habitually, hundreds of them, having either dimmed audible information or not hearing things at all. Not only that, but that's also from that, I mentioned earlier that scholar practitioner concept. This is also what I've seen in all these scenario-based environments that I've trained other officers in. They don't hear the gunshots. They don't hear radio traffic when the sirens are going and they're driving 100 miles an hour to go from point A to point B. And they're involved in all these tasks that are sucking attention and sucking that RAM or that available space that's available to process information. And they're not picking up details that they're not listening for or details that's unexpected because they're so focused on something else.
Okay. And so you did review the video, and obviously no one knows what someone heard, right? And the question for you is this the type of condition where it's possible that auditory exclusion could apply? And in relation to the information you reviewed, do you think that it's possible that Officer Schurr experienced this sort of condition of auditory exclusion?
Yes.
Can you explain that, please?
Basically basically repeating what I just said. If you look at this incident and think about what were the attentional demands of the officer as he went through this process, and what were the attentional demands when that taser went off. He was fighting, he was doing all kinds of different things that he's already discussed, but clearly I see that as a rapidly evolving, complex situation, significant stress, and that sound, that noise was already, the sound was a little bit dimmer than what it usually is. I'm a taser instructor, so that's something I'm very familiar with. And so it wasn't as loud as what it would normally be. When that taser went off, he was in the middle of, or it occurred at the same time he was speaking. So that's another reason, when you're yelling something, a noise from somewhere else during all this other stuff may not be heard.
Okay, and you've watched the video. There's a suggestion that the Officer Schurr stopped in the middle of a word. Is there anything else about that particular point in that video that suggests that maybe it's not that he just happened to have heard something? There are other conditions that could have been in play.
Well, after the shooting, he gets on the radio and he's unable to complete a sentence. He starts saying 1915, send me, and I think there's a long pause and more units, or I've been involved in an officer-involved shooting, something to that effect. There's a pause there. So is it possible that when that taser went off, that he just couldn't finish that sentence because he was out of oxygen? He couldn't, the breathing.
Even if he heard it, meaning his ears comprehended the sound, would you expect a human being in this situation to engage in analytical thinking about the significance of that second taser pop?
No.
Why not?
Well, analytical thinking is when you have that time to go from one step to the next step, simulate, talk about, think about, what could we do next? What would be the outcome of that? Whereas when you're in a situation like that, you're kind of relying on what's called heuristics. You're kind of matching patterns and cues and information the best that you can under the current conditions. And as you're flowing through this, I just lost my train of thought. That's horrible. Could you repeat the question for me one more time?
Well, I actually had a couple more. Can I break this down a little bit for you?
Sure.
Let's start with, what is heuristics?
Heuristics are basically patterns. We develop patterns from our experiences. So knowledge, training, and experience. As we come up through our lives. We start learning details about people, places, and things. And we store that knowledge. And when we recognize a similar pattern, we make very rapid, sometimes implicit decisions about that information and make decisions based on that. And it works for us most of the time pretty well.
Okay, and you were talking about what the brain does, the sort of the psychology of doing analytical thinking in a situation like this. And I don't know if you finished your answer or not, but is it your opinion that a human being in this situation wouldn't necessarily be observing all the information and stimulus informed through their ears, but they would understand what's going on even if they heard it?
Yeah, and that's where I was going with that. That's not an analytical process. You're kind of responding very quickly to the information. And if you hear a noise while your focus of attention is on all these other things, this rapidly evolving, I need to grab this, I need to control that, I'm trying to maintain my balance, that's going to take a lot more of your attentional resources. Then, so you may not have heard it. It is common in these policing incidents similar to this to not hear or see or recognize the situation as what it was in the moment.
All right, so I'd like to move on to, I like to call split-second decisions, but I don't think that's a medical term, right?
No, it's not a medical term.
But perception reaction time, including movement time. Can you tell the jury what perception reaction time is?
Yeah, so when we talk about the time from when a stimulus presents itself, meaning something that I need to respond to, like a red light on the wall. I'm told I need to push a button when the red light lights. So that's the stimulus. So there's a time between the stimulus presentation and my first movement. And this is going to be weird for you, but that's actually reaction time. You haven't moved yet. That's all the mental processing time that's going on. You're recognizing the stimulus, you're deciding what to do, you're selecting an option. In this case, you already have that selected for you. And then beyond that, when you start to move, to push that button, so if your fingers, you have to start like this, light comes on, there's going to be a delay, and then I'm going to start to move. As soon as I start to move, reaction time's over. Now I'm in the movement time mode, however long it takes me to move my hand from here and push the button. So task complexity and there's all kinds of issues that are potentially going to slow down that initial perception reaction time. On the back end, the movement time portion, also the task and the complexity. For instance, if it's not just a button, well, I have to reach down and grab my firearm and disengage the retention mechanisms, draw, aim, fire. That's going to obviously take a lot longer time because there's more involved in that process.
Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit with an example that the jury's seen many times. There is a still shot in this case of the moment the casing of the bullet that was used by Officer Schurr is coming out of the gun. You've seen that?
I have.
So that's a moment in time.
Correct.
Can you tell us what is that moment in relation to perception, reaction, or movement time?
That's well after perception, reaction, movement time that has occurred.
Okay, so that time period, perception, reaction, and movement has completed at the moment that's already out there.
It had to have, yes.
I mean, the function of all this is there's time that it takes to actually make something happen, right? First you have to perceive it, and then your
Correct.
body has to do certain things in response. And I think you talked about pushing a red button. In a controlled environment, have you actually studied this where you figure out what's the fastest somebody could go from perception to end of movement?
We have looked at that. I did the handgun study I talked about earlier. But I think what you're getting to is just there are studies out there that have done similar experiments, and they've looked specifically at that reaction time component, the time that you can't see, because they're looking at the moment of when the stimulus started and when the person started moving. So it's the time between there. So it's implicit. You can't, there's cognitive processes going on. That time period in studies that involve firearms draws is about 250 milliseconds, and that's consistent between two studies that I can think of.
Okay, 250 milliseconds, break this down for us. That's less than a second.
It's a quarter of a second.
Is this where we get the term split second, because we're splitting them up?
That would be the correct way to use that, yes.
All right. And so the fastest in a controlled environment that someone can go from perception to movement is less than a second, but basically a quarter second?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. And that's in a controlled environment. In a uncontrolled environment, in the real world, we're not in a room with a red light, would you expect that reaction time to be slower?
Well, again, that's that mental processing time component, and that's in a very, very simple task. You're talking 250 milliseconds. When we have the real world influences, stress, age, complexity of the task, how many things are you attending to, the saliency, how important is that stimulus in the environment? Is it bright or is it dim? Does it capture your attention? All those things now are going to influence whether or not you pick it up and start this process. And then, as again, the task complexity is in the movement time portion. That is also, as I explained, going to lengthen the time. But in this particular case, it could be relatively quick as far as the total process of perception to response time, if we're looking at the changes that occurred that Mr. Schurr testified, or Officer Schurr testified to, that may have caused him to use the force that he did.
Okay. So the ultimate question here is, I talked about this one moment in time where there's a casing coming out that shows the sort of the bullet casing in the air. Is that reflective on when Officer Schurr made the decision to shoot?
No,
Okay. So it was sometime before that.
it has to be.
All right. And obviously it can't be after that.
No,
All right. But you don't know exactly when that occurred.
no, it's implicit. I can only rely on what the officer said.
Okay. Now, you also saw the testimony of Professor Stoughton, where he said that Officer Schurr had sufficient time to give a verbal warning.
Yes.
Do you agree with that opinion?
No.
Why not?
Well, as I understand it, Professor Stoughton assumed that the decision was made to fire the weapon when it was drawn. I don't believe that's the case, based on testimony and based on my observations. Because if you look at the video, you see the weapon drawn, it gets pointed at Patrick, and then there's an additional directive command that's given. And then there's still more time after that and changes that occur before the shot is fired. So I think it's totally speculative that the decision to fire, to come out and pull the trigger, was made when the weapon came out of the holster. And what I see is, I do see a change in the environment, in Patrick's positioning, that is consistent with what he has testified to, that elicited that decision. So that's a small period of time after the last directive was given. So if the decision was made after the last directive was given, that's a small period of time. So if you think, if the warning is expected to be drop the taser or I'll shoot, how long did it just take me to say that? Maybe a second and a half? So the immediacy of the threat doesn't allow for that. So for that reason, I don't think that it was feasible.
Okay, and you talked about a change in the environment. Are you talking about when Mr. Leolia was turning?
I do.
Okay. and there wasn't sufficient time to give a full compound sentence warning in that particular moment.
Not my opinion, no.
Okay. Nothing further?
Thank you, Your Honor. I want to go into some of your writings there. A copy of this, I want to know, can you tell me if you recognize that?
I do.
What do you recognize that as?
Factory, that's a study that I did. It's actually the peer-reviewed and published article from my thesis, my master's thesis.
Your master's thesis.
Yes,
So this is factoring, fatigue, and deadly force encounters, kind of what we're talking about here.
correct.
Now, but your thesis was based on, this article was based on, you lost an overwhelming amount of data, didn't you?
An overwhelming amount of data. It's been quite some time, sir.
Take a look, this is what you wrote.
Sure.
Highlight portion, top paragraph.
Okay, actually, yeah, that's true. I wrote that.
Yeah, you wrote that, you lost a total of 215 participants logged into the program, but only 53 were actually able to complete the questionnaire that you wanted.
Correct. Wasn't a questionnaire, but there were
What-
53 participants.
53 participants
Yeah.
out of the 215 that tried to log in. And then you based your decision on your thesis on 53 participants.
I did.
And they were all supposed to be law enforcement officers.
They were.
Well, they weren't because of a portion of the subjects were unknown to the researcher, although unlikely, it is possible that not all the subjects were in fact police officers. That's what you wrote.
Wait a minute. That's you have the wrong face page on that. This is not right. Yeah. Okay, I'm getting this confused with something else. I apologize.
That's
My
right.
fault.
So 50, out of the 53, and you start out with 215, you went down to 53, and out of the 53 of law enforcement officers, you can't even say they're law enforcement officers for sure.
Correct.
And this is your rigorous Kaplan University master's thesis.
Well, sir, I mean, you can criticize it if you like, and we could go through it if you like, but ultimately, we lost a lot of data. That's not unusual in research. You lose data. Some participants are excluded. That happens. We reported on how many participants we had. We reported on the results, and we sent that in for peer review publication. It was accepted for peer review and publication. So it was rigorous enough for that.
For the law enforcement executive forum? That's what it is? Law
Yes.
enforcement executive forum.
Yes.
That's the basis of almost all your publications, isn't that true?
A portion of them, yes.
Well, you list about 50 of them. We're going to go through Police 1, Force Science, Police 1 again, Force Science. Those are all police-related entities, correct?
Yes.
Vertra News, that's Lon Bartle's
Company.
company.
Yes.
You're familiar with Lon?
I am familiar with
You
lawn.
work with him quite a bit?
No.
Not at all, but you did an article with him, didn't you?
Yes.
Okay.
Not with, yes. Yeah.
You did a joint article with him, right?
Yeah.
But he sounds like did he sell the California Post the simulator you use?
I have no idea. No, we don't even, as a matter of fact, when I was working there, we didn't even use that simulator, so no.
Yeah, I'm looking, there's probably about 25 Police 1 articles. It's the vast majority of the things you write in, correct?
Correct.
one of the Police One articles I found. Digital media evidence and force investigations, back at, looks like October 19th, 2020. You recognize that?
Yeah, I certainly do, thank you.
Okay. And that was with Mr. McFarland, who sits in the back, right?
Correct.
This is a whole article about how the two of you worked together on a very similar case, a use of force case, where both of you testified for the defense in that case, correct?
Yes.
And you wrote an article about your experiences in that case,
Yes.
and how the use of force captured on video can be misinterpreted, exposing officers and agencies to significant criminal and civil liability risk. That was the purpose of the article, right?
I don't know, it was certainly something we wrote to lead into the article, yes.
One of the things they brought up quite a bit on was the freeze frame photo that he asked you about a number of times in terms of when the moment the shot was, you see the thing.
Yes.
One of the things you consider, though, is you think that the best way to view a video is by frame, isn't that correct?
I think that's a good method to see everything that needs to be seen due to failures to see and other issues that can occur to an observer.
I'm going to show you another Police One article. This was September 21st, 2017. Do you recognize that?
I do.
Okay. You wrote this article.
Yes.
Okay. In this article, you wrote, investigations involving any video should be broken down frame by frame to see and understand more of what occurred, as the human eye is not capable of picking up data at full speed.
Yes.
Those were your words.
Yeah, I stand by them.
Yeah. Your personal experience includes a video showed hundreds of law enforcement officers and civilians. Once a frame by frame is shown, a new vote is taken and the exact opposite occurs. So you would advocate frame by frame.
I do advocate frame by
Did
frame.
you watch any of our frame by frame?
Absolutely.
Another Police One article that you wrote. It was November 17th, 2016 article.
Yes.
This article, and I'm not sure if what you're talking about, you wrote, people learn to store information through their lifespan through training and experience. This allows us to make quick, unconscious, and often correct judgment about people, places, and things, right? So that's the heuristics you were talking about,
Yes.
okay? However, there are times when these judgments and decisions can be wrong using that heuristic, correct?
Correct.
Just looking at it, I got some not exactly great psychology today. That's kind of a periodical you're familiar with.
I am familiar with.
It's kind of the for people who are not academics, they could probably, it's something they rely on, and you're familiar with it and look at it time to time, I would assume.
I do on occasion, yes.
They talk about heuristic decisions. They talk about it's a mental shortcut that allows individual to make a quick decision, pass judgment, or solve a problem with minimal mental effort, correct?
It does say that, but I think that deserves context.
They can reduce the burden of decision-making, but they can also be costly when they lead to individuals to miss critical information or act on unjust biases. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, but it deserves context.
Here with the Journal of Criminal Justice.
Did you ask me if I was
Yeah, are you
familiar with it?
familiar
I'm
with-
sorry, I didn't hear you. Yes.
Yeah, you're familiar with the, it's a peer-reviewed journal, if you will.
Yes.
It's, something, I don't think you have any articles published in it, but it's something that's relied upon in the criminal justice industry, if you will.
Sure.
I have this article examining police use of force, examining the relationship between calls for service and the balance of police force and suspect resistance. In this statement, it says, research concludes that officers develop hunches about how suspicious an individual is, the likelihood they have a commitment, and their moral character. Would you agree with that?
Could you do that one more time?
Sure.
I'm sorry, it was a little quick.
The research concludes that officers develop hunches about how suspicious an individual is, the likelihood they have have commitment, and their moral character.
Sounds like you're reading the results of a research article that I haven't read, so I'm not going to agree with it.
You're not going to agree with that, okay?
Well, I have to read the research.
Get the context of it?
I would like to, yes.
Familiar with, this is a little bit different, criminal justice and behavior.
Heard of that one, yes.
Okay, something you rely on, is a peer-reviewed,
I may have read an article from there. I don't know.
okay? In that, they talk about split-second decisions. You talked a little bit about split-second decisions. They say there's no time for considered analytical decisions. They rely on intuition and experience. A split-second syndrome exists where rapid decision-making inhibits diagnostic capabilities, resulting in bad decisions, right?
It sounds like you're reading the results of a study again. Is that just the narrative, or
That's what the quote I have from the other article.
can I see it?
I just put it away.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, before I comment on an article that I haven't seen, is that possible? Yes.
That's possible. That's
but-
one of the
but
things that, I mean, heuristics can lead to bad decisions, right?
Heuristics can lead to,
You
yes.
jump to conclusions. That's maybe a simplified way to do it.
Again, context. I think, people, like I said, if I had to wait out and put a, and I don't have a scientific reference for this, but if I had to say on a daily basis, we make hundreds of heuristic-based decisions, and most of them, if not all of them, are right. And it does happen where that failure to go deeper, that we make an error, certainly.
Thank you. Anything further?
A couple follow. Mr. Becker talked about the single frame where the casing is coming out, and he was talking about frame-by-frame analysis. You don't have any problem with frame-by-frame analysis?
No, my articles and everything I would talk about specifically focuses on frame-by-frame analysis. Is absolutely something you want to do in a case like this.
The point of your testimony is that you should look at the right frame.
Look at the right places in the right frame, track movement between frames back and forth. There's a myriad of things, yes.
Okay, and now we talked about Mr. Bloomfield and Professor Stoughton. Are either of them experts in human factors that you're aware of?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Had you heard of Mr. Bloomfield prior to this case?
Bloomfield, no.
Okay, you've heard of Professor Stoughton.
Yes.
Okay, nothing further.
Nothing further.
Hand raised on your jury, so I'll have my clerk come in with that question. First question is, we heard that the defendant was focused on getting his taser back from Mr. Leoya. Even when someone is focused visually on something, is it possible to experience auditory exclusion related to what they are focused on?
That's a great question. Is it possible? I think so. There's not a scientific experiment on a situation that's just like this. But my opinion would be that sound is different than a visual, unless there was a visual indicator that went with the sound. So like if there was some type of small light that came on that was noticed, and the sound, then I would be more inclined to say, oh yeah, you should probably hear that sound. But in this case, all this environment's moving very, very quickly. He's maybe focused on the taser, we don't know where he's looking. We get an orientation from looking at the video, maybe where his head's looking, but we don't know where his eyes are looking. So what his focus of attention on in that precise moment, I don't know. I don't know where what he was seeing at that moment. So ultimately, yes, I do believe that you could be visually focused on something and not hear the sound in a situation like this.
Okay, and another question, as a police officer on duty dealing with threatening situations daily, is there any actual possibility of analytical thinking in most stressful situations?
Another good question. There's a mixture. I mean, we don't just go through all day long in this heuristic-based decision-making mode. There's a balance between the analytical and the heuristic. We rely more on the heuristic as things start to speed up, become time compressed, and we're under stress. When more time exists and no stress, then we're more likely to engage in analytical decision-making. So there's a balance that's going back and forth throughout the day. And in a police officer's life, it depends on what the situation is. If they're at a domestic violence call and the scene's secure and they're doing interviews and they're asking questions and complying with a list of policy requirements, then it's very likely that they're thinking analytically. What do I need to do here? We'll check the box and accomplishing all their tasks. However, when they first got to the scene, and things were rapidly evolving, and maybe someone was holding let's just say it was rapidly evolving, then they're going to go back to their training and experience and recognize that situation and start doing very quickly what they need to do until that situation slows down a bit.
Any follow-up from those questions, Mr. Cordillo?
No, you're not. I think we are.
Any other hands raised? May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
And would the defense like to call the next witness?
Your Honor, is it possible we can take a restroom break? The next witness